So we're gonna go through this before the meeting. So we have about 36 people in the meeting. So I guess we'll start with the introduction. My name is Andy Bissessa, representing the SPETT Program Committee. Thank you for joining us. We have
How do we drag it across though?
oh so today we have we have a presentation for you all by Mr. Javed Razack, titled How Effective Have Recent Bid Rounds Been Increasing Production? So to start with a look back of the technical sessions we have done in late 2024, there are about 10 sessions done, and we've done some into 2025, some including distinguished lecturers, technical sessions, in-person technical sessions, chatting with CEO series, classifications and characterization of petroleum reserves, drilling operations, field trips. All right. So today will be the session on bid rounds. On the 21st of August, there will be one chatting with CEOs with Vana Janki Prasad, Senior Law, Energy Consultant. This will take place at Touchstone Exploration Office at South Park. Also on the 28th of August, we'll have another chat with CEO Mala Baliraj from Massey Wood. Recently, there was the meeting this is the 2nd of July at Caras. This was a great event, very good turnout. It was opened by the Honorable Ridal Munila, Minister of Energy. There were 3 sessions, also 5 high-impact technical sessions, including field development, production optimization, digital transformation, economic and financial challenges, and enhanced oil recovery techniques for mature fields. Well, thanks again to all the sponsors that came on board for this event. Some shown here. And we have a lot of testimonials from people who attended, talking about what they got out of it. So for today, well, I'd like to introduce Mr. Javed Razack. He's the VP of Shared Services at Ramp Logistics. So Javed has spent 15 years in the energy sector, first as a geophysicist, then later at Ramps Logistics, managing departments like business development, contracts, procurement, legal, compliance, and human resources. He has a BSc from UE in petroleum geosciences and an MSc from Aberdeen University in oil and gas enterprise management. Javed has been involved in several chambers of commerce, statutory boards, and societies like AAPG, SPE, and GSCT, of which he's a past president. So today he will talk about how effective have recent bid rounds been in increasing production. So without well, let me put you onto Javed now for him to give you this very interesting presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Andy. Good afternoon, everybody. Andy just clear that you hear? Make sure you hear me clearly, please.
Yeah, you're good. Very good.
All right, excellent. And you all are seeing my screen, I hope, this title slide. Yeah, seeing the presentation.
Yeah, see lots of hands. Yeah, loud
Yeah,
and clear.
all good?
All good.
All right, excellent. So the title is How Effective Have Recent, and when I say recent, looking at 20 years, right? 20 years of bid rounds. How effective have these bid rounds been on increasing oil and gas production, right? So we're going to go through a bit of background and before we get to answer that question directly, right? So here's a disclaimer. All the information used here was from public domain, media releases, the Ministry of Energy site, and so on, right? So while I think it's just about accurate, it can have some errors inside there, and if it does, be happy for you guys to point it out afterwards so I can have those looked into. Yeah, but thank you very much. Okay, so here's the first question. So I'm going to go through the presentation. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and I guess afterwards you could ask questions directly. So as I go on, just take note of what you guys might want to ask, right? So first question I have is, what is the goal of a bid round? What's the end goal of a bid round that is? Is it to attract bids? Is it to award blocks? Do we think a bid round is successful if we award blocks? Maybe. Is it to get seismic surveys done? Is it to have wells drilled? Is it even to make discoveries, right? And I think the answer is all of the above. Yes, those are all goals of a bid round. But the ultimate goal of a bid round, I think most people would agree, is to add oil and gas production, right? It's to add additional molecules of production, which ends up being an additional source of government revenue, right? That is really what we want out of this. So, I think that's clear on what purpose of a bid round is, right? We measure success, the ultimate success, by if we add oil and gas production, right? So how does a bid round work? In a nutshell, right? And the process might change a bit from time to time, but in a nutshell, blocks are put out by the Ministry of Energy for nominations. The bid round is opened, and the nominated blocks are put out. During the period where the bid round is open, there's a bid round open right now. Proposals are accepted, right? When the bid round closes, bids are evaluated. There's criteria that would have been defined internally by the ministry. And based on that evaluation, awards may take place, right? You don't have to award, there's no guarantee that blocks will be awarded if any companies meet the criteria that have been set out. Yeah. After a period of contract finalization, there's then contracts can be signed between the ministry and the operators involved. After that period of contract signing and finalization, you typically have an expiration period in these contracts, normally 5-6 years for onshore, on shallow water, and as much as 9 years for the deep water, right? There's different phases, right? The exploration phase having a mandatory first phase, and then optional second and third phases, right? So usually in that first phase, you might have seismic acquisition, you may or may not have wells to be drilled, and then based on what you find, then you might get to companies can opt, the operator can opt to go into the next phases, right? The obligations, minimum work obligations, which is seismic wells, geological studies, things like that. Yeah, they are included in those contracts. So the amount of seismic to be acquired and so on. And all of these things are supposed to be done by certain deadlines. So they put dates. They say a well must be drilled, for example, within 24 months of the signing of the contract, things like that, right? So there's criteria for dates as well as number of wells, amount of seismic. With the wells, they may also say how deep it has to be. Sorry. Okay. All right. So what does a bid round look like? So there's a current deep water bid round out there. So on the screen is a map of the current bid round. you'll see in red that, so the entire map shows the maritime acreage of TNT, right? And the area highlighted in red is are the blocks that are out there right now for bid. The yellow blocks, that is. So the red outline is the deep water acreage, and the blocks in yellow are the ones that have been put out for bid, right? Those that are in pink are the ones that are currently licensed. So you'll see in the deep water, you have 5 blocks that are currently licensed today, right? With 2 with Woodside, 2 with BP, 1 with BGI, in this case is Shell. Yeah. Okay. So that's what it looks like. So we're gonna talk about what blocks have been awarded over the last 20 years from through bid rounds, and what happened to them. What did they find? Did they produce anything? And what's happening right now? So to answer the question in short, right? If the ultimate goal of a bid round is to add production, then the last 20 years of bid rounds have not been very effective, right? And I'll go on to explain why I say that. And there are some caveats which we will go through in here. So we already said that the main goal of a bid round is to add production, right? But what are the other benefits of having a bid round? Because there are some. So the first one is that there are relatively small but still important additions to government revenue that comes through various fees and bonuses that companies pay annually. So in every contract that's signed, there are different obligatory fees for different things, such as a surface rental fee, right? Usually charged per hectare. I give one example here. So block 23A, which is one of the deep water blocks, I'll toggle back to it. 23A, you'll see over here, the one that has Woodside on it, is about 250,000 hectares, and the rental fee is around $8 per hectare. So they actually are supposed to be paying $2 million US each year to the government as a surface rental fee. Some other examples here, there are administrative charges. Typically, an example might be about $300,000. This is deep water blocks, $300,000 per year, and it increases by 4% per year. Training contributions to universities, 120,000. Research and development contribution, same thing. Some contracts have a technical equipment bonus, a one-time fee. Most of them have a scholarship bonus. In the deep water, it might be as much as $100,000 per year, escalating by 4%, a lot of them, right? So just for an example, in 2025, this block alone should give the government about $3 million US in fees. And that has nothing to do with production. That's just mandatory fees, right? So when you look at all the blocks together, the shallow water and land blocks typically have smaller fees, but you could see that it could produce a sizable amount of revenue for the government in these different fees, right? So this is one of the big benefits to a bid round that has nothing to do with production. What else? So the biggest benefit, in my opinion, is really that work done during the exploration and appraisal phases, that's drilling, seismic, and other things like that, brings quite a lot of foreign spend, right? So you have foreign rigs working in the country, you have all these different contractors and so on here, and that gives the local services sector quite a bit of work, right? Hundreds of companies typically employed in the services sector when you're drilling wells and doing work like this. That generates employment, right? The persons pay taxes, the companies pay taxes, and most importantly, consistent work, as in having continuous drilling and other types of work like that, keeps the sector strong and competitive, right? Because once you have big gaps in activity in a sector, people get laid off, you demobilize equipment, you're kind of out of the game a bit, and then it's more expensive and more difficult to start back up, right? So when you have consistent work, you keep things quite competitive and quite strong. So that's the second reason I gave here for benefits of a bid round. There are small fees that the ministry gets for bid round packages. I saw some quoted around $40,000. So I think when companies bid, they have to pay bid fees, right? So there's some income there to the ministry, small amounts. And then the fourth reason I put here is not easy to quantify, but there's a huge benefit to the country when it comes to inspiring confidence in the sector, right? So a successful bid round, when you have blocks signed, it does inspire a lot of confidence both locally and internationally. The country is spoken about in international events, trends in international news. There's a big benefit of having major IOCs, international oil companies, on the map, right? It means that we open for business. People think outside of the country that if IOCs are in here, that means we've met a lot of criteria for investment. We must be safe. We must be politically stable. We must have a relatively ease of doing business and so on. So there's some good benefit just to have these companies working in the country, right? Good. So those are the 4 reasons I came up with outside of actual production that there is some benefit to having a bidder. Okay. So what's a summary of what actually happened for the last 20 years, right? So based on everything I found, about 34 blocks were awarded through bid rounds since 2005 to 2025. So all the bid rounds for the last 20 years have awarded about 34 blocks. 12 onshore blocks, 10 shallow water blocks, 12 deep water blocks, right? There was, however, as you all will see, almost a 10-year gap with no bid round awards. So there was bid round awards in 2014, and then there were no bid round awards until 2023. So 9 years about that there were no blocks awarded. And that really has some big ripple effects on us as we go forward. Only 2 of those 34 blocks have actually seen production come out of it. And those 2 blocks are NCMA 4, I'll point it out on the map shortly. That's operated now by Shell, producing gas, and the Ottawa block that's onshore that's producing gas by Touchstone. So just those 2 blocks out of 34 have actually produced hydrocarbons since, right? Now, of that 34 blocks, 12 of them were only awarded in the last 2 years, right? And so 12 of them haven't had any wells drilled yet. They're all in the very initial stages of the exploration phase. Some of them have had seismic offshore. The onshore blocks, I don't think they've done much yet, right? And 11 of those 34 were relinquished and are currently open, right? So we're not going into all of this in a little more detail now. Okay, so this is a very big, busy slide, but I want to spend a few minutes on it because this summarizes everything basically, right? So 34 blocks, all of them over here. I have the type of contract on it, production sharing contract or ENP license. For the purposes of this talk, you can ignore that. It's just a block, right? We have the names of the block, the operators who they were awarded to, the locations. So the kind of orange color is land. The light blue color is shallow water, and the deeper blue color is deep water, right? So it kind of gives you an easy reference on where these blocks were awarded. You can look at the award year. So we started in 2008, and we've ended up in 2025, right? We started in 2008 because the bid round that came out in 2005 didn't actually award blocks until 2008, right? The question is, has there been production out of these blocks? And they're all no except for 2, which is the 2 I just pointed out. And then we have some comments on the status of each block. So I want to run through quickly, and then I'll go to the maps to actually show you where everything is, right? So in this first group in 2008, 2 contracts were awarded to Parex, the Central Range shallow and deep blocks, which actually overlay each other. It was actually one horizon like this and one block like this and one overlaid on the deep side. So it's like one piece of area, and they have come up with the shallow and deep concept, right? There's no more shallow and deep. They did away with that. And the Central Range block has been modified now into what is the Charuma block. Part of it has been cut out, called Charuma, and the Charuma block is now operated by Touchstone, right? Guayari block was also like that, shallow and deep. It was awarded to NICO Resources in that same bid round, right? And those blocks are currently open. Nobody's operating them. Block 2AB was awarded to NICO as well. They got quite a few blocks in that period. 2AB, NCMA 2, NCMA 3, and 4B, all shallow water blocks between 2009 and 2011. And those last 3 came out of a 2010 shallow water round, right? 2AB is open. NCMA 2 has now been taken over by BP over the last year. And NCMA 3 and 4B are open blocks. NCMA 4 was awarded to Centrica originally 2011. This Centrica sold their assets to Shell some years ago, and Shell is producing from NCMA 4 right now as part of the Calibri project. They relinquished the rest of that block that became NCMA 4A, and EOG is operating that block now, right? Block 5D is currently operated by Shell. It has not seen production. Then there were, between 2012 and 2014, there were quite a few, I think 9 deepwater blocks awarded, right? Coming out of 3 deepwater bid rounds. So 2 blocks were awarded in 2012 to BP that they still have today, 23A and 14. Those blocks had several gas discoveries. The only real discoveries in the deep water, and they are operated now by Woodside. The project is called Calypso, and it's currently awaiting FID, right? Final investment decision. So these are actually the most highest potential blocks on this table. The other blocks, 5, 6, 28, 29, 23B, 3, and 7, all awarded to BHP in that period, 2013, 2014. None of them have produced, all have been relinquished, all are currently open, right? And some of them are on the current deepwater bid round. In 2014, there was also awards of 3 land blocks, Rio Claro, St. Mary's, and Ottawa, to Lease Operators Limited, Range Resources, and Touchstone. Rio Claro has not produced, is operated by Touchstone now since 2024. That block was also modified in shape. St. Mary's block was relinquished and is now operated by ENV since last year. And the Ottawa block is the other one that actually is producing gas right now from Hoho and Cascadura fields, right, from 2022 and 2023. And there's quite a bit of additional work planned for the Ottawa block by Touchstone. So after 2014, you'll see there was nothing until 2023. So there was a deepwater bid round from 2021 that awarded 3 blocks in 2023. And I'll show you those on the map. 2 from BP and 1 from Shell. Then there was a land bid round in 2022 that awarded 5 blocks to Nabi Construction, Oil Belt Services, 2 to Touchstone, and 1 to ENV that I just mentioned. And then last year and this year, 4 blocks were awarded in the shallow water to Shell, BP, and 2 to EOG, right? Because there was only a year or 2 years or even a couple months, nothing has been drilled in those blocks yet. So we don't expect to see any production there, right? So a lot of information on this table, but I'm going to the map now so you all will have a better idea where I'm looking at, right? So I have 2 maps here, right? The one on the left is to point out, with these 2 big purple stars, is to point out the location and the shape of 2 blocks that no longer exist, the Central Range block and the Guayguayari block. So the Guayguayari block is now open. Nobody's operating from it. And the Central Range block is the one that I told you was modified. So you'll see on the next map that it has the Charuma area that is actually split into 2 areas, and those are operated by Touchstone. You'll see the name is Primera on the map. The yellow stars are all the blocks that I'm talking about from that table that I just showed. So you'll see all these yellows. Yellow means that they're currently licensed to operators, and the purple means that they are open. So you'll see these 2 blocks, Charuma, operated by Touchstone, Cipero block, Touchstone, Rio Claro block, Touchstone as well, Ottawa block, Touchstone, St. Mary's block, A and B, which is split kind of across the map as you'll see here, Nabi, Aripero, Buenos Aires, Oil Belt Services, right? So the same names I mentioned before, they're on this map, right? And most of them in the very early stages of exploration. So seismic is probably planned and then some wells to be drilled, right? So this is the land part of it. On the offshore bit, going back to the same map, right, with all the different blocks, and put stars where the yellow stars means those blocks are still operated today, And the purple ones are ones that have been relinquished and are now open, right? So I'll look at the deep water first. You'll see the same 5 I mentioned there, 2 from Woodside now, 23A and 14, and then 25A and 25B, both operated by BP, their partner is Shell. And then 27 operated by Shell and their partner is BP, right? Those were all signed recently. The purple stars inside of there, 28, 29, 23B, and the others on the right-hand side here are all open are all open, right? And those yellow blocks means that they are currently in the bid round, so companies can bid on it. You'll see in block 5, right? TTDAA5, you'll see a big red field, right? So you might watch that and say, well, that looks like a big gas field. So there was a well drilled, 1 or 2 wells drilled in that block that had made gas discoveries, but was deemed uneconomic, right? And those blocks were relinquished. So there is some potential there, I guess, as well. There was a discovery there, right? If you go to the west, I'll zoom in now on the shallow water stuff in the next slide, right? So this covers the deep water blocks. So this is the north coast of Trinidad. So I'm zooming into this one first. So NCMA 2 at the top there is currently operated by BP. This was one that was awarded back around 2011 or so and was relinquished and now was awarded to BP. NCMA 4 is split into 2 pieces. This is the one that Shell has right now that's producing gas for the Colibri project. So you'll see the names of the fields there, Orchid and Iris, in those blocks, right? The rest of the block was relinquished and was licensed last year to EOG. And that's what you see in the middle, NCMA 4, right? The purple star here is NCMA 3, and that is currently an open block. And looking at the east coast of Trinidad, we have 3 blocks that are currently licensed from that list. Modified UC, licensed to Shell, 5D licensed to Shell, Lower Reverse L licensed to EOG, right? And then 2 blocks that were licensed now open in purple over there, 2AB and 4B, right? So I know a lot of people who are not familiar, when they look at the table, they probably doesn't make much sense, but then when you see it on a map, you kind of have a better picture of where everything is, right? So hopefully everybody has a decent idea now of where the blocks are on shore, where they are in the shallow water, and where they are in the deep water. Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to take 1 minute to mention that there were several blocks awarded in 2005, but they were not considered for this study because they came from the 2023 bid round, but I wanted to mention them anyway, right? So the 2003 bid round put out several blocks in shallow water, and there were a few awards, and a few of them are actually producing now. So there was block 1A and 1B, they were awarded to Petro, and 22 were awarded to Petro-Canada, who no longer exists. Block 1A is the one that De Novo operates today and is producing from the Zanoli field. Right, a small amount of gas being produced by De Novo. Block 1AB is open. Block 22 is being operated by Shell, and they are also producing gas from there through the same Colibri project. Block 5C is currently operated by Shell and also produces gas through the Dolphin platform. Block 4A is operated by EOG, and they produce gas through the Toucan platform. And there's a block called 3B that at the time was awarded to a company called Kermit, which was an Anadarko subsidiary, and that block is open, right? That block never produced. So I just thought it was worth mentioning that there was some success just prior to that in 2005 from those blocks. But since then, not a lot of success, right? So can a block be awarded outside of a bid round? The answer is yes, right? There are provisions where you can negotiate directly with the Minister of Energy, and it has occurred previously, right? It's not very common, but it has occurred before. There's also the mechanism that Heritage, formerly Petrotrin, operates its lease out, farm out IPSC model where smaller blocks onshore. Smaller blocks or fields or even individual wells can be subleased. And many of the small operators onshore have acreage through this program, right? So a lot of the operators onshore, even the ones that I showed on the map before, they have blocks that come through heritage. So if we're saying that only 2 of the 34 blocks actually had oil production or gas production, in fact, both were gas, where has most of the new production come from, right? Because we have been increasing production. We have a lot of new fields come on in the last 20 years. So the answer is that the existing blocks held by BP, Shell, Perenco, Woodside, EOG, those operators have been drilling and developing in those blocks. And it's not because they've been fulfilling minimum work obligations. They've just been seeking their own interest, basically, exploring those blocks to their full potential, right? And out of these, mainly BP, EOG, and Shell really had been doing a lot of that. And there's some recent discoveries from Perenco, who's been expanding their footprint. And of course, Woodside, formerly BHP, had recently developed the Ruby discovery, which was a contract and that was awarded prior to the dates on this, right? Onshore, there was continuous work by Heritage as well as all the other LO, FO operators. But again, no real new discoveries, right? It was more development work type things. And on the West Coast, also very few discoveries. On the West Coast held by Heritage, right? Mostly development and continued maintenance of existing operations. So all those fields that you hear about in the news that are being developed, coconut, flamboyant, ginger, sip, and all those different fields and so on, blackjack, etc. Those are all from the existing blocks that those operators have. Okay, so what can we look forward to from the existing sign blocks, the ones that are currently being operated? So the same Calypso Deepwater Discovery, that project, there's possible, we're very hopeful for FID on those blocks, right? On that project, that would be the first FID for a deepwater gas project. Really hope that gets there soon, right? There are 12 new blocks, as I mentioned, under exploration. 3 deep water, 5 onshore, 4 shallow water, all licensed in the last 2 years. I'm hoping that at least a few wells come out of this in the next couple of years, right? And we hope to see some discoveries there and some of those blocks go into commercial production. There's a current deep water bid round going on, as I mentioned before, and as we looked at on the map, new blocks may be signed there. And we heard in the last week or so, or last week or two, some very interesting revelations from the minister that Exxon has been in talks with the Ministry of Energy about some of the deep water blocks not included in the bid round, right? And I could show you it's actually the most eastern blocks that they're talking about. Those 7 most eastern blocks are the ones that Exxon is speaking to them about. So that's very encouraging news as well. What's worrying though? So this is what was encouraging, but what's worrying? What's worrying to me is that there has been no oil discoveries in the deep water. It seems to be gas, and gas, of course, is a lot harder to monetize, right? We've seen oil discoveries in Guyana and Suriname in their deep water, huge discoveries, but not pure gas out there. In our case, we seem to find gas so far, just gas, right? Much more difficult to figure out how to get that to shore. Because you need to have a pipeline or a floating solution, which is very, very difficult and expensive. So that's probably why the FID on those blocks have been taking a while, right? So yeah, it's also worrying that it's been taking so long to get Calypso to FID, but part of the challenge is because deep water gas is tough, right? And there's been limited commercial success in blocks awarded for the last 20 years, 2 out of 34. And even if you take out the last 12 that were awarded in the last 2 years, that's still 2 out of 22, which is just about 10%, which is still pretty low, right? In terms of actually getting gas out of it. I didn't mention the production numbers. I think Colibri produces around 200 million scuffs per year, per day, sorry, and with the project with the Cascaduran Coho onshore with Touchstone. I'm not sure the total current production, but I figure it's somewhere in the vicinity of 50 or 60 million scf per day, right? So meaningful amounts, but not massive amounts overall, right? So summary. Bigger operators find it difficult to produce the mature and small fields economically, right? So the summary of thoughts really is that the bigger operators like BPs and Shell and so on are better suited for deep water. They find it difficult to monetize those very small fields, right? And the mature ones. And we see that taking place because we see BP and Woodside selling some of their older assets to Perenco, for example, right? Bid rounds still have value, especially for the deep water because it's very frontier still, right? Nothing producing out there yet. I think we need more companies the size of EUG and Perenco, companies that are a bit faster, nimbler, smaller in size, lower cost base, better at working mature fields as well, both on the east and west coast. Shallow and onshore, where we have a lot of data. So we have a lot more information onshore, of course, thousands and thousands of wells. A lot of data in shallow water as well. Lots of wells, lots of seismic. A better approach might be to directly negotiate with those operators, right? Rather than just through bid rounds. And you have to find fit for purpose operators though, right? So you can't just put out blocks and hope that people come to it. You have to go looking for the people that you want to buy and invest in those things. There are companies with the right fit, but they don't necessarily come looking to us, and we need to find them, right? They may be North America, South America, Asia, Africa, somewhere else, right? They exist. There are lots of them out there. But I think that direct negotiation approach, very shallow and onshore, may be needed, right? And then onshore, we have many small skilled and experienced operators that can maximize existing fields very well, right? A lot of those small operators, they've taken fields with 0 or close to 0 barrels of production and have got it up by several hundred and sometimes even thousands of barrels, right? But they're not very interested or very good at exploring, right? Touchstone is one example who've actually explored on land to some extent and has had some success. So we need some more of that if we want to pursue exploration onshore, right? Otherwise, we're just going to be, doing basically mature field management for the most part, right? When I was doing research for this, I came across this article from the EITI from Mr. Long that was published last year, actually. So, and the conclusions match up pretty closely to what I have as well. So I'm reading it out here. Based on EITI data, the country has had 11 bid rounds between 2010 and 2021. Analysis shows that most of the exploration blocks did not reach production phase. Therefore, in some instances, companies did not make any payments of any taxes. During the same period, total payments from upstream was 149 billion TT dollars. In fact, blocks from the bid rounds from 2004 onwards, which is the same period I'm looking at, approximately only count for about 3% of that, right? This indicates that blocks developed before 2004 account for the bulk of the country's oil and gas revenue, right? So that matches exactly with what we've been talking about so far. So last slide. What are some of the recommendations coming out of this? Get Calypso to FID ASAP, even if it means a low government tax take. I suspect that's already underway. I know it's been in discussion and so on. We had a change of government, so it's probably at the top of their list. But that's very, very important to get done as quickly as possible. Get a new major in the deep water. Happy to have Shell and BP and those guys there. They've been in Trinidad for a long time, but we need some new or old, if you look at it like that, players out there with big pockets, right? I mean, if they speak into Exxon, and that's excellent. Get them inside there, find a way to get them in, get their name on the map. Continue the bid rounds for deep water, let's say every 2 years, right? But if you really want to get the deep water bid round successful, you need an FID. So people say that there is viable projects and there's viable work out there. Seek out fit for purpose operators for the shallow water, especially. and negotiate directly, right? On land, we may need to rethink the relationship between heritage and these LOFO operators, right? Should some of these operators have direct contracts with the ministry, we need to think about what will result in higher production and revenue to the government in a sustainable way, right? I think if we're trying to figure out what will result in higher production, higher revenue to the government in a sustainable long-term manner, then we could be guided by that, right? And figure out, is there logic in having some of these operators directly licensed with the ministry? Is the arrangement with Heritage optimal? Are there some things that need to be tweaked in there, right? That's something that needs to be relooked at quickly. And then there's a suggestion that concept, I should say, that came out of some discussions we were having recently in Houston with different operators and so on. So I'm putting it out there as a potential model, right? Or at least a starting point to have a discussion. Is there an opportunity to fast track drilling in open acreage onshore? So we're talking about open acreage onshore, not of things that not acreage that's under license right now, right? Can we take open acreage and get drilling happening in less than 2 years? Is that even possible? So here's the idea, here's the concept, right? That the Ministry of Energy puts out all the open data for onshore, including what prospects have been identified by the ministry or previous operators. And they put out all that information. They say, this is what all the operators who've operated onshore, this is what they came up with. These are their maps, these are their models, these are their thoughts. This is what we think. We put all of this out there. And then you put it out for a certain period of time, right? Just like you would do with a bid round and say, okay, the data is open for 6 months. And then any interested parties, we directly negotiated with you for, in this case, an exploration and appraisal license only that requires drilling within maybe a year, maybe 2 years, right? The catch here is that the ministry has to help fast track all the regulatory approvals, including the EMA and all those things, right? Maybe even getting some things pre-approved, right? Like you get things pre-approved in a blanket way, and then you have the final approvals coming in later when you have the specifics. It's possible, maybe, right? This model would mean that there's also no bid fees, there's no annual fees under this license. So there's none of those extra fees that we were talking about. The operator and their partners, they take all the risk in drilling. And if there's a discovery, then maybe they can have a guaranteed stake in a development license, which they put out to bid afterwards, right? So the point of this is really just to fast track drilling as quickly as possible and get some momentum going there. If a small company has the pockets to drill, but maybe not to develop, then they can be a partner on a development. And bigger companies would typically be interested in bidding for development because somebody has already de-risked it by drilling and having a discovery and appraising that discovery as well, right? So that's a potential model or an idea behind a model, right? That can happen. And key here is the ministry driving those regulatory approvals to get things done really, really fast. Because right now, it takes from the start of a bid round to drilling onshore, you're talking 5, 6, 7, 8 years, sometimes more, right? So that's the end of the recommendations. And thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to take some questions now from anybody. So Andy, I think back to you.
Yeah, Javed, thank you for that a very insightful presentation. So sure there'll be some questions. Questions, anyone?
I see one now.
Javed, look at the chat here.
Yeah, I'm going to the chat now. Yes. So I see Ibrahim is asking if during a license period an asset is deemed non-commercial, what happens next? Does the government help the company offset their losses? Ibrahim, if you want to explain that a little further, what do you mean? Like if a company drills and they don't find anything, that's what you're asking?
Yeah, something akin to that, as if sorry, hi folks, hi Javed, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Like if they drill and they either find something that's non-commercial or they find nothing, and they realize, okay, it doesn't make sense continuing in this particular scenario. right? And they decide to, which kind of leads to the second question, and decide to close up shop effectively. Because they would have spent quite a bit of money in this whole process, does the government assist with those companies in offsetting their costs that they would have put in?
No.
Okay.
The risk is on the operator to explore, and any money spent and lost there is that's the risk that you take, right? So the government does not absorb or help absorb any of that.
In that turn, then, you mentioned during the operation period, even before oil or gas even, hit, right? Because of taxes and employments and stuff like that, the government would, even before production, they would be getting, whether it be taxes, whatever the case may be. Does that mean even for an unsuccessful operation, they get income, the government?
Yeah, and they'll get it through the things that I had put out, right? So they'll get those annual fees, like the scholarships and training and those small fees. And they, of course, I mean, if you're drilling a well and you're using services in the country, and people employed and companies are paying taxes and so on, then yes, of course they get some through that, right? Of course, those are minimal amounts compared to what you're looking for, but yes, there is some income and some tax dollars that the government gets through exploration. Yeah, correct. Right. But to answer the first question again, no. If you have a non-commercial discovery or you don't find anything at all, yes, the company simply has to relinquish the block, right? They have provisions. There's certain time provisions in the contracts by which they have to relinquish if they don't move forward. So it's spelled out in each contract.
Thanks so much, Javed.
Hi, Javed, are you hearing me? This is Vendra from
Yeah.
Heritage.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. So I have a team of, actually, I'm sharing a presentation with a few of my colleagues. So I have a question from Fernando Thomas, who's an economist. So Fernando, you could go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Javed. Just a quick question, right? So, looking at the conclusions from the presentation, right? Basically, bid rounds have not generally been successful, given that it hasn't had a material impact on production over the last 20 years. So I was wondering, so obviously geology is to an extent we have no control over that, right? But then there's this frontier deep water there as well. But I was wondering, in terms of looking at the agreements themselves, like production sharing contract with the ministry, what do you think can be improved so that we can perhaps turn that around? I'm thinking perhaps maybe fiscal terms and other sort of rights and obligations under the contract. Do you see value in that in any way? Because I understand over the last 20 years, we've been doing more production sharing contracts with new acreage in Trinidad and Tobago. So I was just wondering if you have any insights into those mechanisms as well to help improve our bid rounds.
So every bid round the ministry would look, and maybe there are some ministry people on the call who could add if they want to, right? Every bid round the ministry would evaluate what they can change or tweak with these contracts to make them more attractive, right? So I do know that every single bid round there have been some changes, and some things have been positive because that's why sometimes you have no awards in a bid round, and then you have then you do have some awards, right? So sometimes they change the criteria for bidding. Sometimes they might be tax changes or fee changes and stuff like that. So there are continuous improvements being made. But the biggest one I would think would be around commercials, right? So if you want to get if you have discoveries that might be marginally economic, right? So let's say Calypso is marginally economic or tough to make it economic, then you probably need to revise your tax system inside of there, right? Which probably is most likely the discussion that they happen right now. So I would say that's the biggest one. And then there's the things around the timings of the obligations and so on, right? A lot of the obligations are not met within the time periods that they specified in the contracts because of the regulatory approvals and the time it takes to get approvals for everything, right? So companies agree to drill within, let's say, 5 years, and then they realize it takes them years to get seismic, years to get approvals, years to do things, and it takes a long time. So I have always thought that those time frames have been difficult to meet, and should be some of the things being revised as well. But that's why I'm really advocating for direct negotiation with a lot of these things, because then the companies could directly say, this is what we think we could actually do, based on this particular block, based on the geology here, based on the size of it, based on the size of the price and those things. Hope I answer some of your questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. Can I just ask one more question as I have the mic? I was just wondering from a sort of subsurface point of view, right? What do you think the fact that Exxon has all the seismic control and information from Guyana, from the Starbuck block, that it really sort of de-risk that deeper area to the right, which you were showing on the map. What sort of opportunities you think Exxon might have seen from their work in Guyana?
So, I mean, I can't speak for Exxon, but I've seen Guyana seismic. I don't know if anybody here has. Guyana seismic is pretty flat. And there aren't a lot of faults and stuff like that. So you could trace reflectors quite far in Guyana. And more than likely, they've looked at their seismic and they've been able to trace some of those horizons probably close to our border. And that's why they probably suspect it goes beyond. Now, once you get into our Trinidad area, it's obviously not flat anymore. It's extremely complex. So I think that's probably what they're interested in, and they probably want to acquire some data out there and see if there's some potential. So yeah, I think if they're interested, then let them in and let them take a look at what's possible out there.
Thank you.
I see some more comments on the chat here. So Christy said, okay, so it's a comment, I guess, reprocessing seismic data and new surveys. And Christy, I think there's continuous reprocessing of data. And I know there's literally been seismic surveys just last year in the deep water and some of the new blocks. I know there's been OBN technology, OBC technology, and lots of other things like that offshore. So I think, yeah, seismic has improved greatly so far. And Janice asked, have you looked into why each block was relinquished and if there's any trends for improvements? Yes, Janice, yes, I did. Not talked about in this, but I did. So the majority of these blocks, as you said correctly, were relinquished without drilling. And a lot of those blocks never drilled because the companies never found real drillable prospects or they ran out of time. So they had to drill within a certain time frame and they basically ran out of time and decided, well, just relinquish the blocks. So they committed to drill, let's say, within 6 years or maybe 3 years or 4 years in some cases. And by the time they finish seismic processing, by the time they get EMA and other approvals and we're ready to, and we'll get in there, it was already out of time. That's a big problem for those blocks. Yeah. So that's a big room for improvement as well. When I remember having discussions with persons in the ministry and they were like, well, why do companies bid and say that they're going to drill and do things in a certain time frame if they can't realistically do it? But the answer is companies are competing with each other to get blocks, right? So they're going to promise things that they may not actually be able to do. And that's just the nature of it. So you have the company agreeing to something that's probably unrealistic and the ministry agreeing to something that they know is unrealistic in terms of time frames, right? Janice, I don't know if that answered your question, but yes. And Ibrahim is asking, are the assets that we potentially have warrant the cost of site technology? Well, I mean, that's something to look at case by case, right? Okay, so anybody has any more questions? I'm not seeing any hands or anything up right now. Okay, somebody's asking, have you heard any whispers from the government on their plans? And are they speaking to and taking advice from industry experts to move forward? I do not know. I know that there's a new government, a new minister, new advisors, new state boards being put in place right now. So I do hope that they are speaking to the persons about plans. I know certainly on the downstream side about the refinery and so on, there's a lot taking place there. On the upstream side, I do not know. I know a lot of good work was done in the last 2 years to get some of these blocks signed to progress some of these discussions that they've been having. So I hope that some of these considerations are taken, especially with the onshore, I think, and shallow water. I seen a hand up, but I don't see where it's coming
Christian,
from. Hey,
Christian,
hi,
you there?
how are you?
Good day, Razack, Javed. Are there any recommendations? I know I saw the recommendation you made about putting out all the data on the onshore, including prospects, etc., and negotiating a separate exploration drilling license. And then once you have a discovery, negotiate a development license. Is there a model for that? And is there anything about the Guyana licenses that you want to recommend too? In terms of a jurisdiction.
Yeah, understood. So you're asking what the recommendation was. Is there something like that already exists? That's what you're asking, right? About the
Is it
onshore?
that you use is it that you have a jurisdiction that you found this was used successfully?
So
Or is it
yes. So there are a lot of jurisdictions actually where they have development licenses separate from exploration licenses. But this particular concept was just based on what the challenge onshore, right? And to me, when it comes to exploration onshore, it takes a long time, right? And we're going to see that because blocks were signed last year, and we're going to see how long it takes to get drilling done, right? Some of those operators onshore might actually be able to drill pretty quickly because they already have rigs in country and they may have already identified prospects, so that's a good thing. But I mean, I've spoken to companies myself who say that they could drill a well onshore. They have $10 million. They have how much of it costs, and they're willing to drill a well if there's a good prospect, right? But what they don't want to do is go through this bid process. They don't want to pay fees every year. They don't want to have to go and beg for approvals from every agency, 50 approvals sometimes or more, right? So if you could cut that out and fast track that, basically the ease of doing business there, they'll drill, they'll put that money out there. They may not be able to develop a discovery, but they'll be interested in being part of a consortium. And then once you have a discovery, others would be interested. So it's sort of a model from other places, but not like just copy the wholesale, right? And on the Guyana side, the Guyana PSCs are more or less the same structure for the most part as Trinidad. The only recommendation I have out of Guyana's PSC structure is that they made all the PSCs public, right? You could go and read the entire thing. It's not confidential or secret. And I would definitely recommend that for TNT. Yeah. Suriname as well is also public. I think I see one more question here, Aaron. If a block is awarded and is placed on production, is data gathered and made available to other operators from the operating company? Aaron, you want to unmute and just explain what you're asking here? Explain a little bit more.
Yeah, Javed, excellent presentation. I know a lot of operating companies tend to keep their data private, and most of which is within the shallow water area, as we've seen. Is that something that should be looked at where data is eventually made available after, let's say, like a 2 or 3 year period where we could get a better understanding of the deep water acreage? Because right now, most of what is being produced within the eastern corridor is from the Columbus Basin, which we have loads of data on, but we're struggling to actually get interest in our deep water acreage, as well as being coupled with the geological difficulties and infrastructural risks involved, such as pipelines and whatnot. So should data availability be made easier to get?
Yes, so okay, for example, when BHP had all those deep water blocks and they relinquished the blocks, all the data that they acquired and all the studies done would have gone to the ministry, right? And then the ministry has all that data and information. So when they put out the bid rounds, they probably have made all of that available, right? So once it's relinquished, it's the government's one and they can put it back out there completely, right? So that happens. You're kind of asking about data that is currently under license. That's what you're asking?
Yes, yeah. I think it's like should be made available after, let's say, your contractual obligations are met, for example, where we're not dipping into the pockets of the operator company, but we're also giving other companies that have the money the opportunity to explore within the area.
So I think the model for that right now is that if there is a currently licensed block and another operator wants information on it, they have to negotiate directly with the operator of that block, and the ministry kind of gives its blessing to go ahead and share information. So that happens, but it's not like it becomes public. So you can't, I don't think a Shell block that's currently operated by Shell is not that after 5 years or 10 years, all the data becomes public while they still have the block, But if a company wants to work with them, they can directly negotiate and do that. So it's very difficult to tell an operator to make your information public while you still have it, right? Maybe, but it's not an easy competition to have.
Okay, that's all.
Okay. Anything else? I see another hand up, but again, I can't see where it's coming from.
Hi, Javed, Anton Paul here, Hydrocap
Hey,
Channel
Anton.
Limited. So from your presentation, I'm seeing a trend, 2 to 3 years to evaluate a bid, 10 years to produce a block. One of the things I noticed though in the last 10, 15 years, we haven't had any significant new international players coming into our region. And I think what is making that more difficult now is the competition from Guyana. Have you done any comparative analysis in terms of what you've done here in terms of head license fees, fiscal regime, regulatory approval processes, how that compares in Trinidad to Guyana, and what strategies that they are using that we should probably be looking at to adopt to shorten the timeline for E&P commercialization?
Good. Yeah, that's a great question. So I've looked at it a bit, not in great detail, but the PSCs are public, so we can look at them, right? Their annual fees, I'm not sure exactly what they are, but they are less, and there are less of them, right? There's not as many different things. The biggest thing that they did was find big discoveries, right? So almost no matter what you have in those contracts, those big operators are interested. But I think the transparency of the taxation system and so on is quite clear. I think even in Trinidad, most people know the royalty is, I think, 2%, and then the profit share is 50%, and all those kind of things. Pretty well known. The regulatory agencies and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it seems that they are moving faster for approvals over there, right? It seems like things happen faster. It could be that it's happening faster because they are doing less due diligence. It could be happening faster because they are more efficient. I don't know, right? But you see things moving quite quickly you're talking discovery to FPSO producing in 5 years or less, right? In a country with a lot less infrastructure than we have.
Have you looked at the Canadian model where they kind of have a tendency of having unsolicited bids submitted, and if that would
Yeah.
work for the Trinidad region?
Yeah, and that's kind of like kind of along the lines of what I was talking about, where if you put the data out there for open acreage and you kind of leave it publicly open, then you take unsolicited bids at any time and you directly negotiate at any point. Because what you want to do is you want to keep this pipeline, this figurative pipeline of opportunities open consistently. You want to have rigs drilling all the time, right? So when you know that there's going to be a gap, so when you award 12 blocks in the same year, you know that for the next 5 years, you're probably not going to have any drilling happening from those blocks, right? And then in 5 years, you're probably going to have drilling all at the same time. But you don't want that up and down. You kind of want to balance it out. So you want to find those people who could fast track the drilling as well as you pointed out through direct unsolicited bids.
Thank you.
Any more? Maybe one more. Andy, we have one more. Maybe one more question from anybody. One more comment.
Hey, Javed. Kieran here. I want to be quick. A good presentation, great presentation. Thanks for compiling all this data. So in terms of like this operatorship, right? So you see right now we have a lot of the bigger operators divesting of the mature assets. Do you think they're kind of just reallocating capital to make this push forward deepwater, or is it maybe the capital is going to go elsewhere? What's your opinions on that?
It could be a mixture of both. So I was told that those BP assets that Perenco took over would have only been economic for maybe 2 years again, for them, for BP, that is, right? And I remember when Repsol sold to Perenco, Repsol also said that those assets would not have been economic for them for more than a couple of years left. But Perenco has had them almost 10 years already, and clearly they're doing well, right? So I think they've reached the economic limit for some of the operators for different reasons. And yes, there might be some redeployment of capital for exploration. And that's it, right? You want fit for purpose operators. So the big guys with big pockets, deep water exploration type things, mature assets, they have their companies who specialize in that, right? So yeah, I think it's a mixture, yeah, and getting some Exxons and others back in the deep water would be ideal at this point. But again, keeping in mind that you sign a block tomorrow to Exxon and drilling, evaluation, development, production is still 15 years away, right?
Yeah. I see. One more for you is: do you think the biggest hurdle right now for deep water is the geology, or is it more the fiscal regimes for Trinidad?
You see, we don't have, I would say geology, right? Because we have discoveries there right now that are gas, right? So gas is going to be tough to monetize no matter what because it's going to be expensive. So to make the gas worthwhile, you need to adjust the fiscal system. But until you could prove that it works for at least one operator, then other operators are going to be like, gas, is that really making sense for me to explore for, right?
Yeah.
So it's either you de-risk it by again getting more people to find something else, or you de-risk it by getting the fiscal regime so attractive that even if it's gas, companies are like, okay, we're still going to go for it.
Yeah. So basically, kind of like making it so attractive fiscally that we get people to come in and prove the hydrocarbon systems out there.
That Calypso discovery is worth nothing if it's not produced. It's worth zero if it stays on the ground, right? So, I mean, in a worst case scenario, even if ministry took almost no taxes, there's benefit to get that out. Not saying that that's what they should do, right? There must be some kind of balance, but it's worth nothing if it stays in the ground.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for all these questions, everybody. Andy, anything you want to add before we go?
Yeah, I think that's it for the time. So yeah, we wrap it up there. And
okay, well, thank you all very much. Appreciate the engagement discussion, and y'all could feel free to chat with me and have some more discussions on all of this. Thanks very much.
all right, great. So now, yeah, before you go, Javed, so on behalf of SPTT and SP at large, I want to thank you for this very insightful presentation. We'd also like to present you with a certificate as a token of appreciation, and also thank all the participants for being here to engage in this discussion. So I'll just share this screen with the certificate. One moment, so everyone can see. All right, so yes, I would like to present this to you with
all right, thank you very much, Andy.
for your dedication, time. Yeah, you're very much welcome. So yeah, once again, thanks.
Everybody.
Thanks to you, thanks for everyone to come in. On behalf of SP, we look forward to seeing you guys at other events. All right, thank you.